Sounds good. Thanks.
Yeah, let's go with that. We can troubleshoot after. Okay, so I'm just wanted to welcome Larry Barzelai.
Excellent.
Okay, and he's going to speak to us about physician advocacy and climate change. And I think he's going to make the case that this is the crucial health issue of our time. And so really it impacts all domains of humanity, including health. And so I think it's on us as physicians to play our part to try to advocate for change to avert disaster. So Larry, welcome to PALS. And at the end, I think there'll be plenty of time for a discussion. Thank you, Larry.
Well, thank you very much, Tyler. And I'm honored to be here, and thank you for this invitation. Just a bit about my credentials. I'm a family physician. I'm chair of the BC branch of CAPE, the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment. CAPE deals basically with the intersection of health and the environment. We'll talk more about CAPE as this presentation progresses. No conflicts of interest. Everything I do is volunteer, and that's simple. I thought we'd ask a question first. What is the biggest environmental problem we face? I guess what Tyler just said in the title sort of gives it away from my perspective. I think climate change is. I wonder if anybody else would have any thoughts on other important environmental issues that maybe are important that we should also be considering at the same time as climate change. And I would like to just open it up for opinions at this point if people have something to add.
And people can use the chat function if they prefer as well.
Ocean acidification.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Andre just said ocean acidification.
Good point. Intricately connected with other issues of climate change, but that's a big one for sure.
In the chat, there's biodiversity loss.
Big one. People are talking about the fifth extinction, that we're facing a time where many species will be extinguished. Totally connected with climate change. That makes climate change a bit challenging and a bit interesting at the same time. There's so many different aspects of it. It relates to so many other issues.
We got plastics in the environment, pollution a couple times, drought, famine.
Yeah. All excellent points. From our environmental group, we try to cover most of these angles and try to focus on what we think are the relevant. Okay, I want to introduce you to Bill McKibben. He wrote a book called Earth about 20 years ago, EARTH, and I just want to read you a bit about what he said in this book. He said, for the 10,000 years that constitute human civilization, we've existed in the sweetest of sweet spots. The temperature has barely budged. Globally averaged, it's swung in the narrowest of ranges between 58 and 60 degrees Fahrenheit. That's warm enough that the ice sheets retreated from the centers of our continents so that we could grow grain, but cold enough that mountain glaciers provided drinking and irrigation water to those plains and valleys year-round. It was the correct temperature for the marvelously diverse planet that seems right to us. And every aspect of our civilization reflects that particular world. We built our great cities next to the seas that have remained tame and level, or at altitudes high enough that disease-bearing mosquitoes could not overwinter. We refined the farming that has swelled our numbers to take full advantage of that predictable heat and rainfall. Our rice and corn and wheat can't imagine another earth either. Occasionally, in one place or another, there's an abrupt departure from the norm, a hurricane, a drought, a freeze, but our very language reflects their rarity, a freak storm or an occasional disturbance. The planet on which our civilization evolved no longer exists. The stability that produced that civilization has vanished. Epic changes have begun. We may, with commitment and luck, yet be able to maintain a planet that will sustain some kind of civilization, but it won't be the same planet. And hence, it can't be the same civilization. The Earth that we knew, the only Earth that we ever knew, is gone. Pretty heady stuff, but that's just reading his book propelled me into climate activity. Just a couple of recent quotations from Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the UN, that humanity has a choice: cooperate or perish. It is either a climate solidarity pact or a collective suicide pact. And the UN report last year saying it's code red for humanity. Now, my question to you, and would welcome your response to this: is this real or is this hyperbole? Comments on that?
My guess is most of the people attending here are attending because they think it's real. But
Okay, good enough.
obviously, not all society shares that view, unfortunately.
Yeah, good enough point.
Yeah, several people in the chat voicing support for real.
Okay, now these are some images and stories from COP27 that's happening in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt right now. This is from Angela Ramirez from the Marshall Islands. We've lost to the sea the sports field at our school. We now swim where we used to play soccer. We also fear that the children will lose their house to the sea. The whole existence of our islands is under threat because of the climate crisis. In the middle of Africa, in Chad, Miriam Musa reports that our city was flooded last month in the middle of the night. People had to get up and leave their homes in a hurry, torn apart. In Niger, the Sahara is advancing at the same time that the heat and the sandstorms have become unbearable. The desert is closing in on us. People here don't have air conditioners and can't sleep at night because of the heat. We need to live with nature rather than trying to conquer it. Fairly dramatic statements that came out of COP27 I thought were worth sharing. And we'll look around to see what's happening in the world. The dramatic floods in Pakistan that flooded, I think, a quarter of the country and caused incredible damage. The drought that continues in Africa and is to a great extent causing the refugee crisis there. Fires in Australia that have killed some people, that have devastated territory, and apparently millions of animals have died as a result of these fires. And we don't have to go to the rest of the world, and especially last year in Canada and BC, the highest temperatures ever recorded in Canada. What impressed me, it wasn't just a fraction of a degree higher than the previous average. It was more than 4 degrees higher than the previous temperature ever recorded. How dramatic is that? And 600 people in BC due to have died because of the heat. Excuse me, my phone, I didn't shut off. Sorry. Sorry. How to shut it off. The town of Lytton burned to the ground. The atmospheric rivers destroyed much of Fraser Basin agriculture. So we're seeing it. We're seeing it right here in Canada, right here in BC. And now the question is, why is climate change a health issue? That's some of the thoughts I had about this, that thousands of Canadians are dying prematurely due to air pollution. The figures are around 20,000 people and more than 1 million people worldwide. People in Africa who we've talked about that are becoming refugees and trying to cross the Mediterranean to escape to a healthier place. A lot of the diseases worldwide are increasing dramatically, malaria and dengue being the two most concerning. Canada has been spared. Disease will come here too. And previous figures said that around from the year 2030 on, that around 250,000 people will die per year due to the effect of changing climate, and they've increased that to now over 500,000 deaths per year because of climate change. This is particularly concerning, is to me, is the concern among youth, that the Lancet and the youth study of people aged 16 to 25 and asked them what they thought about the world and about the changing world and climate change. And 75% think that the future is frightening, and at least 84% were worried about the future. Echo anxiety that affects people, that people don't want to have children because of this. So that to me is the scariest thing going on at all. What other generation did not want to have children because they were so worried about the future? Now, what has Canada been doing? You can see that from this graph, not much. The year that's often used as a basis for comparison is 2005. We can see that Canada's total greenhouse gas output was 741 megatons in 2005. And you go to the right, there was a bit of a dip in 2020, probably due to COVID, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's gone up again. So we talk a lot about climate change, and at the Paris Climate Summit in 2015, the world had basically agreed to a 2.0 degree increase as being the maximum that we would allow. And Trudeau at that point said, no, we're going to do better than that. We're going to limit it to 1.5 degrees centigrade. But you can see from this graph that it is nothing's happening on the ground. At the same time, the other countries, big bad U.S. under Donald Trump has reduced their carbon output, mainly due to interventions by states such as California. But they've done something, and we've got the signal honor of being one of three countries that have the largest greenhouse gas output of any country in the world per capita. That's our claim to fame here. And healthcare, the area we're involved, the same thing. We're the third highest country per capita in terms of our country's total emissions. So we've got a lot of work to do within our own profession, let alone otherwise, to try to deal with this problem. And what is the problem? It's fossil fuels, period. We know that fossil fuels are the culprit, and we know that fossil fuels are being subsidized by governments in BC, governments in Canada, and we're talking the talk about reducing fossil fuel exploration, production, and use, but up to now we're not doing it. The Trans Mountain pipeline that ends in Burnaby, you're probably familiar with, that the government of Canada bought for, I think, something like $5 billion, and now the costs have escalated to $24 billion. And despite lots of protests, one of the formative protests was by mine, Tim Takero, who actually was achieved some press from this, but obviously didn't stop the pipeline. And in BC, we're giving $1 billion a year to subsidize fossil fuel companies in this area when we should be getting off of fossil fuel. This is unbelievable. I guess the last one, I was at the airport last week and saw that it was as busy as it's ever been. There was a downturn during COVID, but now people are flying and releasing carbon gas. One of the groups that I really admire are the what's in northwestern BC. There's a group that are trying to stop the Coastal GasLink natural pipe. They're just an amazing group of people. You see them in the news quite a bit, though probably not enough. And this is near Smithers in the northwest, and this is a healing lodge. This woman Frida Hewson won the Livelihood Award. That's the equivalent of Indigenous Healing Lodge. Now, this healing lodge is viewed to help people live on the land. Indigenous people that are sick or have trouble with addiction, help them live in this lodge so they can recover in a healthy rural environment and take advantage of the opportunities that Mother Nature has to bestow. However, okay, and this is the river that goes through their territory called the Wet'suwet'en. It's called the Morris River in English, and they refer to this as their sacred river. They can drink water straight from the river. They catch salmon from there. The animals live around there that they can hunt, and basically, it's an amazing place. You think of so many Indigenous places in Canada where boil water advisories are in effect, and this is one place where the river is still intact, and they can participate in all sort of natural activities involving the river. However, Coastal GasLink is building a pipeline through there. This is a picture that I took last November. As a colleague and myself being built for the pipeline, and that's the trees in the middle. The picture is this. This is what's happened. This is what's happened. This is a massive industrial scale.
Larry, I'm not sure.
Built this pipeline.
Larry, can you hear me?
The river, and I can hear you fine.
Sorry to interrupt. Your video or your feed is cutting in and out sometimes. I'm going to turn off your video. It should still allow you to present and talk, but it just might stop that lag from happening. I'll turn your video back on when it comes to question time, if that's okay.
Okay. Sure. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, most of the rest of it is non-picture, so that's fine. Yeah, let me know if it works better now.
Yeah, it seems
Okay.
better. Thanks.
Is it okay? Okay, that's the bad news. How about the good news? We can become energy self-sufficient using renewable energies. Another report that came out from a German nonprofit saying that we can achieve 100% renewable self-sufficiency by the year 2050. This is made up mainly by solar and wind. They calculate 88% of the total energy, with the other 12% being other sources of renewable energy, such as hydro, geothermal, etc. And obviously, it's quite a controversial area, and it's a dramatic step from what we're doing now. But at least people think it's possible. And the other aspect of this is always concerned about jobs that are going to be lost when the fossil fuel industry hopefully closes. But the wind and solar and other renewable industries will employ 35 million jobs worldwide, so it should be positive for the economy. Other positive things, this is the City of Vancouver's Climate Emergency Action Plan. Vancouver has been fairly proactive compared to other cities in terms of advocating for reducing climate change. One of the things they've done recently is preventing natural gas hookups to new houses, and they're increasing that prohibition all the time. They have built great bike pathways here for active transportation. We're one of the best equipped cities for that. They're working on densification to try to reduce people's climate that way. So a lot of positive things happening. and a lot of things that cities can do to make a difference too. In the medical field, there's positive things happening too. I haven't been there, but the hospital in Seychelles, St. Mary's Hospital, is viewed as one of the greenest hospitals in North America. So there's positive things that are happening there too. Countries, Iceland now is producing 100% of its electricity from renewable resources and 85% of its total energy from renewable resources. Geothermal is a big source of energy there. Hydropower and fossil fuels are only 15% of the total power. And there's very few countries that have statistics similar to that. What's interesting in geothermal is that apparently BC sits on some sort of a crescent that describes heightened geothermal activity and has potential that hasn't been unlocked, but I think we have the potential there of developing geothermal energy. Denmark's been a star in Europe. They get 40% of their energy from renewables, I think mainly wind energy. And other countries in Europe are stepping up a lot more than we in North America are. You can't see this. Okay, this is a book by Catherine Hayhoe, who's a Canadian scientist. She's got this book called Saving Us, a climate scientist's cape for hope and healing in a divided world. I saw her on a talk show recently. She was asked, what's one thing that everybody can do to fight climate issues? And she said, talk about it. Just get the conversation going. And who knows where it might lead, but don't ignore it. Just to talk. I thought that was brilliant because there's so many possible things we could do. It's hard to know what direction people should take, but just starting to talk about it. Now, I don't know about other people here, but I find when I often talk about climate change issues with friends and relatives, it's often results in changing the conversation to some other topic. It's the rare person that even wants to discuss it, and I find that discouraging. Hopefully others have a more positive experience, and I think among the younger generation things are hopefully more positive than that. We can liaise with governments, municipal government, as we see what's happening in Vancouver. Now, municipal governments regulate building construction and transportation. That's two areas where they can make a difference. And it's been said that municipalities have some influence over 50, 60, 70% of carbon emissions. So that's a good place to start. Provincial and federal governments certainly are another place where action can be taken. The carbon tax introduced by the federal government has been quite a positive thing. Legislation can be introduced that can make a difference, and not supporting fossil fuel companies. These billions of dollars that different governments in Canada are using to subsidize the fossil fuel companies is just plain wrong, and that's got to be redressed. One really important thing going on now in Parliament is a debate on the Canadian Environmental Protection Act. It's called CEPA for short, and this is a bill that was passed, I believe, 23 years ago and is being updated. I just finished second reading in Parliament. Now it's going to the committee stage, and there's several things in this legislation that, if voted on and passed, could make a dramatic difference. One of it is the companies should reveal the chemicals that they're using. Right now, so many of the chemicals they use are protected by proprietary means, and they don't have to release what chemicals they're using. Another part of this is to give people greater access to information and to take steps to redress things. One of the most important things in this legislation is the right to a healthy environment. A lot of countries have invoked the right to a healthy environment in their constitution or in their legislation, and Canada has not. And this is one of the principles that we hope will get established in the Canadian Environmental Protection Reform Act. And we're asking everybody to call up their member of parliament to discuss this with them and to advocate for the strong legislation to be passed. If you require more information about that, please email me, and I'd be glad to discuss this further with you. Now, why is it important for physicians to be involved? Number one, we base our decisions on science, and that's important, and maybe more important than we think. There's so many different other environmental organizations out there that make decisions on things, and sometimes they extrapolate things a bit, and maybe aren't working from a solid basis as we are. And I've been guilty of this a couple of times too, where I've made statements that are stretching the truth a bit, and my colleagues have taken me to task for this. So I'm conscious of needing to be true to medicine and science when we make our statements. The other thing, we're a respected profession. A lot of studies show that physicians are one of the most highly respected professions. Nurses invariably come out higher than us, so we can't let our heads swell too much. But as physicians, we are generally respected. People will listen to us, and it's important for us to take stands. And as we discussed already, health is a crucial feature of climate change. And by looking at climate change from a health perspective, we can really make a difference. One of the things we can do is establish green healthcare teams, especially in hospitals. A lot of departments have established these teams where people who work in departments get together and discuss whatever means they can use to make a difference. You think of various means that any department could use, and the ideas they can use in their local departments, or can go up the chain of command and hopefully be adopted at a higher level too. But just initiating that process is found to be valuable. And what can we do to make a difference within the medical community? I mean, as CAPE and others, we've gotten involved in medical school education, and now most medical schools in Canada have something about climate change in their curriculum, and the LMCCs, this is going to be a testable subject, which is a dramatic improvement. During residency, where I assume most of you people are, and during practice, we should be thinking about what differences we can make. One colleague of ours works as a radiologist, and saw that her department was wasting too much energy and not being efficient in a lot of ways, and established a department of planetary, or a group of planetary health within her division, and has discussed this on a wider scale, and have meetings to see how radiologists can reduce their carbon output, and I think has been quite successful. We got to convince medical organizations to take a stand. As we can see, the Lancet and the British Medical Journal are quite on the forefront of climate information advocacy. Our medical organizations are not. Whether it's the College of Family Physicians, the College of Specialists, or the CMA, they need to be prodded into taking stronger stands on things, and people will respect that. What we can write articles in medical journals, which can be valuable. Doing rounds in hospitals, at least I found it that when I did a round in my local hospital. But it's a good way. It's a good place to get your feet wet, and to learn some of the issues and confront some of the people that might object to this. And I'd advise everybody to try to do a rounds at some point in a hospital or some medical group to discuss these issues, to get the ball rolling in your own mind in terms of what can be accomplished. CAPE itself has a climate change toolkit for health professionals. That's available at cape.ca. So if you might want to write that down, cape.ca. cape.ca has a lot of information about things that I've been talking about, a lot of other avenues, and it's quite an effective organization for accumulating information and taking stands in advocacy. And this particular module, a climate change toolkit for health professionals, is divided up into various is, I think, valuable reading. Another thing that's worth saying is worth maybe touching base with is greenhealthcare.ca. It's a Canadian-wide organization, again started by us from a green perspective, and makes recommendations. They have a pamphlet called Green Office Solutions for Physicians, Tips for a Healthier, Greener Office, which would be worthwhile obtaining. As Cape, we put on conferences every year. A couple of weeks ago, we put on our third annual climate emergency conference. We had between 250 and 300, mainly physicians, attending the conference and having specialists from talking about various aspects of the problem and proposing solutions. So I'd advise people to attend our next October conferences to establish something yourself or look for similar events. And one of the things about conferences, and one of the things about climate change, it's good to be part of a group. It's scary stuff and it's challenging stuff, and a lot of people take the ostrich-like approach, and the stakes are high. So one of the things we found, that being part of a community can really make a difference. Now, what can a physician do within the general community? One thing we've done is organize seminars. There's a fellow called Seth Klein who wrote a book called A Good War. I thought it was a brilliant analysis of what Canada did in the Second World War, how it put everything else aside to direct everything towards the war effort. At one point, Canada was building 3 airplanes a day and a ship every 3 days. Figures that I can't believe, but apparently were true for the war effort. He recommends we do the same. We take the same sort of effort as a country to fight climate change. And the book A Good War, I think, is well worth the reading. Another thing that Cape is doing now is we've been putting out information saying that fossil fuel ads make us sick, and there's a sick-looking fellow with a thermometer in his mouth with the information around that. People are trying to model this on the tobacco campaign of 20-30 years ago, when the tobacco companies were saying, well, cigarettes aren't that bad for you, and they were hiding studies showing the detrimental effects of cigarette smoking, the same way that fossil fuel companies now have lots of information about the evils of, or the harms of, fossil fuels, and they're hiding this information and denying and greenwashing and covering up. So there's a lot of work to be done, but Cape decided to attack fossil fuel ads initially, and hopefully go on to further bans after that. One of the things that one of our members has got involved in BC school curriculum. She noticed that her kids were bringing home information from Fortis, which is the natural gas supply company, touting the benefits of fossil fuel. In grade 1, her kid learned that natural gas is the cleanest burning fossil fuel. Now, well, that might be technically correct, but when you look at it from an overall perspective, it's just nonsense, really. And another statement from Fortis was that greenhouse gases occur naturally, and that global warming is the natural result of all human activity. So they're downplaying the part they're playing in climate change. And Fortis apparently subsidized the Children's Festival in Vancouver. They subsidize many of the local markets in BC. They subsidize the Union of BC Municipalities. Recently had an annual meeting in Whistler. They have their, as an example of one of the rich fossil fuel companies, they have an amazing amount of resources that they're putting out their information, which most of us consider propaganda everywhere, and it's hard to counter, but we have to. One of the things that I guess you can't see the picture again, that Kate put on was a Healthy Climate Solutions Fair. We did this at Milton Wong Plaza in Vancouver last month. And we thought that one of the things that we're criticized for is always being negative. Well, you shouldn't fly and you shouldn't eat meat and you shouldn't use coal. Fair was to show a lot of positive things you can do, the positive aspects of wind and solar. And we had a demonstration of a heat pump and demonstration of an induction stovetop cooking. That was good. We entertained hopefully some of the neighborhood. And it was felt like a good positive thing to do. Another thing we did is challenged Fortis again. I don't know if they still do, but they used to have these great big signs on BC ferries, how BC ferries are running by this natural gas, they emphasize natural. We mounted some sort of a campaign against them. We had a billboard directed at the Tsawwassen Ferry Terminal with our question, how healthy is natural gas, and directing people towards our website, which you can have a look at. It gives you the scoop on natural gas. It's called onnaturalgas.org. You can see a lot of the information that we're presenting there. Now I wanted to talk a bit about co-benefits. That's what's good for the individual is often good for the planet. Like nature experiences, going out in the wild gives one a feeling for nature protection and leads to positive action. Active transportation, that's riding your bike or walking, has health benefits and environmental benefits. Electric burners instead of gas stoves decreases the amount of asthma in children with natural gas stoves, and is also good for the environment. And a couple of areas that have been studied more widely is the co-benefits of a plant-based diet. It's well known that vegetarians have a lower incidence of obesity. So the health benefits of eating less meat and more plant-based diet has been proven. At the same time, we see that cattle are responsible for 80% of the deforestation of the Amazon. I find this statistic hard to believe, but I've read that recently. Hopefully with the new president of Brazil, who certainly talks about preserving the environment, that there'll be less deforestation there. And another stat I saw, livestock are responsible for 18% of the world's carbon emissions. So we're not telling everybody to become a vegetarian, but eating less meat and eating more protein-based food is good for you, good for the environment. Another area that's valuable is public transportation. A Japanese study recently found that people who take public transit are 40% less likely to be overweight, 27% less likely to have high blood pressure, 30% less likely to have diabetes, which is interesting, because why would necessarily people who take public transportation have that health benefit? I guess the thought being that you walk to the bus and you walk from the bus, and you're not just sitting in your car. So that extra exertion, bit by bit, really does make a difference. And somebody in Toronto calculated that that by every kilometer you take the bus or the subway, you reduce your greenhouse gas output by 77%. I've got here what can pathologists do to make a difference? Maybe we'll leave that for discussion. A couple of things that really impressed me was last summer. It was the I think BC's chief coroner, I believe, who did the statistics. It came out with the number of people that died during the heat wave. Now, people have died during heat waves previously, but this was an amazing for this person to come up with a stat to compare the numbers this year to previous years and attribute it to the weather that summer. And this number of 600 plus deaths is used over and over again. It's felt to be a statistically valid number. This is really a positive thing to do. The other thing, I wonder if people could get more involved in environmental toxicities. We're always seeing people that are poor and racialized being more greatly affected by industry and toxicities. If people could investigate why that happens, do studies on it, I think that could be valuable. Now, I've got this YouTube video to show now. Now we're down to the last 15 minutes. Should I show that now, or should we just have discussion?
Why don't we send a link out to the video after the session, if that's okay, Larry?
That's fine. Yeah,
Okay.
discuss is probably more valuable. So the YouTube link is the Bill McKibben that I talked about initially. He's got an update on his original comments, and I find him really powerful, very convincing. So if you get it's like 4 minutes. If you get a chance to watch.
Yeah,
that,
I watched it, and I definitely recommend it to people. It's very straightforward, easy to listen to.
That's great. Well, one thing I thought we could maybe come up with was one thing that everybody can do to reduce your own emissions, A, on a personal level, B, in the medical field, and C, in the community. And that's pretty much all I have to say, except to refer you to cape.ca for further information. And please feel free to email me at Barzelai, which we'll have trouble spelling, BARZELAI @mail.ubc.ca. And now, should I stop the PowerPoint here? We can have discussion.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'm gonna ask you to put your video back on, maybe, and I'll put mine on too. Hopefully, if there's not any more lags, not the presentation stop. But I might actually see if you can send Mayumi some of the links that you included, and maybe a link to that YouTube video. We can send it to all of the pals email list.
Sure, be glad to. Yep.
Any questions from audiences? I think in the chat there was one question early on asking about where does the 4 to 5% figure for healthcare come from? Does it include indirect contributions from building hospitals, traveling to receive medical care, industry that is required to raise funds to pay for healthcare, which is a big part of the provincial budget?
I think it's fairly comprehensive. I could try to find that information. And this is again is rough information. It's hard to be too exact about this. One of our colleagues, I was a medical student, did a study on the match, the medical match, and how much carbon is put out by medical students flying from city to city for interviews for residency programs, and it's pretty dramatic. And things have settled down a bit during COVID, but I think that's a very interesting study to get a hold of. A fellow Kevin Liang, Liang, was the main author on that, and I think gives you a good idea of a lot of waste that we have. And for example, the climate emergency conference. When we started in 2020, we were going to have a hybrid conference. We figured we'd start. This was the new thing is to have things on Zoom and to have things in person. We were going to do both, and maybe have a center in Vancouver and a center in Toronto, and do things that way. But COVID took over, and we did everything online, and have done the next two conferences online, and probably continue that way. And there's a bit of a disadvantage of not being able to meet people in person, but we feel this is probably a preferable way to do things.
And I guess people aren't having to fly or travel to attend the conference in person.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I think probably a lot of us feel is that everyone wants to try to help it in some way, but it's kind of like this overwhelming thing that you feel kind of like, you know, what really impact is any one individual going to have? But I do think that the other way to look at it is just like, even just making incremental change, I think is helpful. And you mentioned a few suggestions, and one of the things, like you mentioned, heat pump offhandedly. And one thing that people might not be aware is there's subsidies for both the federal government, provincial government, and in Vancouver, municipal government, that they give you money back for switching to a heat pump. That basically, when you add them all up, it basically is like a free conversion, essentially, from a gas furnace to a heat pump. And so if you haven't looked into that before, I'd encourage you to, because we're actually doing that with our house, and it's been pretty easy to do, and it's going to be installed in the next few months. And from what I understand, in Vancouver, the climate's very amenable to a heat pump, and it actually has the benefit of offering cooling in the summer too, which is becoming more of an issue. Andre, you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. So thanks for the overview and the suggestions of what we can do. I think as doctors, one of the things that we're most well suited to do or best positioned is to reform the healthcare system itself. And I do question that idea that the healthcare system is contributing 4 to 5% of greenhouse gas emissions. I think that there's a lot of work that goes to support the healthcare system, which is not accounted for in that figure. So I think what we can do to diminish, healthcare that is of, dubious value or minimal, for example, like a cancer prevention program, which has reduces rates minimally about the same amount as if the population were all to become more active, that would have an equivalent effect. The one is going to further our long-term aims and the other is not. So I think we can take the initiative on those sort of changes that are well within our realm. Asking the government to not invest in fossil fuels, I think, is, like any concerned citizen, is something we can advocate for, but we're much more powerful if we advocate for those things inside the healthcare system, where we can make a big difference.
I think you're right. I think maybe we're guilty of this in Cape sometimes. We're telling everybody else how to live their lives. Maybe we should clean up our own house before we start spreading the word. And we can do a much better job of that. I just see what goes on in hospitals, the amount of repetition, the amount of unnecessary testing. It's just crazy. And you look at food services and then electricity and lights and heating and there's just so many different aspects. As a profession, we're not on the forefront of a lot of things. We're a fairly conservative profession, and I think, as you say, Andre, we have a lot of work to do in our own house. And the preventive medicine stuff, for sure. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And a lot of diseases and the people that died during the heat dome were poor racialized people. And having some preventative medicine, trying to bring them out of poverty, trying to provide them with air conditioners, planting some trees in their poor part of town to decrease the effect of heat islands that cities have, are all valuable things we can do, for sure.
Thanks, Andre. There's been a few comments in the chat function. Apparently, turning off cameras that aren't needed during the Zoom chat, not only does it help with connectivity speed, it also can reduce the carbon footprint of the Zoom meeting. So that's a good suggestion. And there was a question about fracking. Did you have any comments on that, about it looks like there's been some efforts to in the States to reduce this, but maybe in Canada it's a bit more maybe less clear if that effort's happening.
Well, that's I mean, as BC Cape, we've been talking about lots of other issues, some things that people have brought up in terms of plastics and ocean acidification, and we've done a lot of things like that. But we thought that fracking is the biggest issue in BC, and people might disagree with that, but we thought that was the one big area where we should put our efforts, because I mean, a colleague of myself gave a talk in Kitimat about climate change issues the same night that Premier Horgan announced his $40 billion LNG terminal. And he was giving out free hot dogs at his talk, and he got a few more people than we did at our talk. But this is the amount of money and time that they're investing is just crazy. And the NDP government has been fairly disappointing. We tend to view the NDP as more environmentally conscious than some of the other parties, but this government has not shown it. Hopefully, with the change in leadership, it'll make a difference. And through various means, we've met a lot of NDP MLAs that are a lot more environmentally conscious than the leadership. And a good thing to do is knock on the door of your MLA, talk to them about fracking. That this is the one major thing that's going to dramatically prevent BC from achieving our climate goals. Which we talked about by 2030, we're going to limit our carbon emissions by 40%. We're nowhere near that. We're probably increasing our carbon emissions. And at the same time, more fracking companies are trying to get into the fray with government support. I mean, it's cuckoo. So anything we can do to try to cut down on fracking. And the other thing is I've been to the north east to see what happens to people who live again, kids in that area of respiratory diseases, of other cancers, of all sorts of things. So people who live in the northeast where fracking is taking place are suffering too.
Any other questions? There's been a few other suggestions on the chat. Apparently pets and pet food has a significant impact on environment. And probably especially a lot of those are meat-based as well. And I guess there's also at the BC renal provincial rounds, they had a rounds on how to reduce waste in dialysis. Certainly in the lab, we see a lot of test tubes, being used on a daily basis and discarded and other materials. So that's certainly one area where potentially in the lab we could. I mean, we're always, I think, looking for ways to reduce unnecessary testing, but obviously any test you do leads to more waste.
Yeah, and I think I might have known the people that have started this renal. A couple of our colleagues on Vancouver Island were quite concerned about this, and I think got the conversation going with in the renal units about waste there, and yeah, one of the things I wanted to say that one of our strengths as BC Cape is that we set an overall umbrella, and people take action. Like this one doc who wanted to take the action in the schools. Another doc saw that the Fortis was supplying money to the Union of BC Municipalities. Somebody else saw that Tilbury, which is close to home for a lot of us, and are taking action in those certain areas. So everybody can do something, and pick a project and go for it. And if Cape can help you along the way, then we'd be glad to.
Yeah, and there's another comment in the chat function about asking about how to reconcile the conflict between capitalism, which encourages consumption, and environmentalism, and just saying that the two often seem to be in direct conflict. And I mean, I think you pointed out ways that you could still align them, but it does seem to be something that's a significant barrier to meaningful change.
Oh, big issue. That's become a more prominent topic on environmentalists. In our recent conference, we had 2 talks about that, about reducing consumption. That you're right. The part of this has got to be a discussion about capitalism, how the whole our whole economy operates. So I mean, I almost hesitate to think about that because of the repercussions that is going to have. But sooner or later, we've got to have the discussion. We can't keep using resources the way we have, even if they are renewable resources. So even the amount of lithium that we're using for electric cars and parts to other parts to make the batteries of electric cars have their own waste. So nothing is simple. Nothing comes without some sort of a environmental cost. So we got to consider this carefully. But yeah, capitalism is a big issue here.
Yeah, definitely. Seen a lot of positive comments in the chat function. So I want to thank you, Larry, for not only your time here today, but just your efforts in general on this important issue. And I'll maybe be in touch with you just to try to get some resources that we can share with our group, and hopefully that can kind of continue to spread the word about the messages you're sending out. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. And just keep in mind that I've got some ideas, and our organization has some ideas that we don't have all the answers. So there's different approaches. People can take different roads to Rome, and I don't know, find some avenue and pursue it. That's my advice. Thank you all.
Thank you, Larry.
Take care.
Thanks everyone
Have a good day,
for tuning in.
everybody. Be well.